And I think we've been a category that has enjoyed growth for decades without a huge focus on innovation and trying to capture different places in the store and different places on the menu. And I think it's really on us now to not lose those spots, but potentially grow them by offering a more diverse portfolio.
And what we see this working is the wineries going out to the consumer now. So one way is through partnerships. Another way is just going into more, we call it mobile wine tourism or wine tourism on the road, or doing pop-up tastings in like urban settings, in cities. For example, here in Petaluma, every Friday night, they have a wonderful place where local bands come and local food trucks, taco trucks and everything. And now small wineries are starting to show up there. And they're really connecting now with younger consumers in those kind of venues. So going to where the consumer is, which we used to do that 20 years ago in the wine industry, and we sort of stopped it.
We used to do this big portfolio tasting in New York City called New York Drinks New York. And it was exciting, and everyone was talking about New York wines in the month of February. But beyond us then bringing the trade and media up to the wine regions a couple other times throughout the year, there wasn't a sustained campaign within New York City to keep that interest going. You know, you need to have a comprehensive strategy that includes these big swings, but also has these small and often little things that are building the identity, building the brand.
Thank you once again for everyone joining here. My name is Sid Patel. I'm the CEO of Beverage Trade Network. We do conferences, trade show, we have media assets. And I'm really thankful for all this lovely people joining me here. They lead their associations, they promote their regions, that's their goal. And more than me, in fact, it's them who are really trying to grow the wine category, and that's the only category they play in, right? So we obviously do wine, beer and spirits, all three. So Sam, over to you. Why don't you give a little introduction and what's the mission of your organization?
Thank you, Sid. My name is Sam Filler. I'm the executive director of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. I've been in this role for about 8 years, and we were created by the state of New York in 1985 to serve as the primary promotional entity and entity that also invests in applied research, so viticulture, enology research, some market research. And our job is to promote the brand of New York wines and grapes.
Karissa Kruse. I am the president and CEO of the Sonoma County Winegrowers. So I'm in the lovely region in just north of San Francisco. I work on behalf of the 1,800 grape growers here, and we have just under 500 wineries. So we are supported through a grape assessment that our grape growers put on their grapes to help fund sort of joint marketing for the region, as well as wineries who join our winery collaborative to participate in some of our partnerships and activations. So our primary goal is to promote our wine region and then also support our grape growers through sort of education and farming expertise to help them continue to preserve agriculture.
Amazing. Thanks, Karissa. Liz?
Yes. Hello, my name is Dr. Liz Thach. I'm the president of Wine Market Council, and we are a scientific nonprofit established in 1996 with a mission to do cutting-edge research on the American wine consumer. We look at their purchasing habits, attitudes, and trends, and do lots of large studies on them each year. And we actually have members who are from all around the world. We have trade associations, we have wineries from different countries as well as the US. And so it's a great pleasure to be here. And I think this is an important topic that we are all looking for solutions today. Thank you.
Great. And for all of you to know, Liz is also master of wines. Liz, you're underselling yourself. And, I think one more thing is I've picked up some of your slides that you've sent me. You've done that research, literally the topic that we're addressing. You've just done that research. So would love to hear later on your findings as well. Jim?
Good morning or good afternoon, as the case may be, everybody. I'm Jim Clarke. I'm the country manager for Wines of South Africa. We are a levy-funded organization. So there's a levy on South African wine exports, which is collected and makes its way to us. And our goal is really to just promote the category of South Africa, soften the ground so that our producers and the importers working with South African brands can get their wines to retailers and consumers.
That's interesting. So I mean, the more you export, the more the budget, right, to promote?
In principle, yes. However, one of our goals has kind of changed with one of the needs of the industry in South Africa, and with the changing market with premiumization, for example. So we're actually been charged more to grow the average price point of South African wines, because we still have a good chunk of our industry selling into the bulk market, which is by and large not profitable for many of the growers in particular. And so we're having a little bit of a problem where, as we succeed with getting higher price points for our wines, the kind of big bulk stuff is dropping off, and therefore we're losing budget to work with. It's quite a conundrum. So
Got it. Julio?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. It's a little bit different in the case of Wines of Chile. We're not levy founded. It's an organization that exists since 1909. So we're very proud to be the older organization of such a type in Chile. And our preliminary vision and effort and role is to represent the industry abroad. We have offices in Asia, Brazil, US, North America, right? And then Europe, and we drive the generic marketing communications for the country, and we help and support and advise both the trade and the producers down in Chile.
Great, thank you, everyone. So I think you guys see a very umbrella view of things, so it's great to see, what's working, what's not. You do a lot of research, I'm sure, so let's get right into the conversation. So the first topic that we have here is the wine and the consumer, right? So how can we talk to the consumer? Maybe start with Karissa. So the question here is, what's the current state of communication? What have you seen effective methods that some brands are winning, and why they're winning? So if you have any insights, please, would love to hear everyone speak on this.
Sure. So no pressure kicking it off. Thanks for that. In Sonoma County, I think, and with all of our associations and probably with all the businesses right now, I mean, it's obviously we're all very budget conscious in terms of having to make every dollar we invest in marketing and promotion really count and return on investment. So for us as a region and as an association, what our model really has been, and this has been a model we've been employing for a decade now, is really leveraging partnerships. So I think, there's the idea and really leveraging partnerships and using our partners to talk to their consumers, their fans, their customers in a really relevant and meaningful way, and being part of that dialogue versus trying to go direct to consumer. So we've seen that. We've been doing a lot in sports marketing, which has been really intriguing for us. We have partnerships with a Major League Baseball team, a National Basketball Association team, different markets. We're working on 2 additional sports partnerships right now, and really trying to enter into a conversation where a community is already convening and enjoying the time together, enjoying the space, and having wine be then part of that conversation and that experience. So a little bit of disrupting, in a sense, in a good way, experiences that the consumers are having. And then also leaning, and we're going to talk about trade in a little while, but also just really leaning into partnerships with, restaurant groups and with our media partners to really leverage, again, where they're out and outreaching in the marketplace and bringing our experience, our winery partners, our growers, to those conversations versus having everything have to be created here and owned here, but really having a shared goal and shared experience.
Could you give us some examples of those partnerships, like couple restaurant partnerships, especially, and like if someone has a state team or a local team, how have you structured your partnership?
Sure. So I think one that's been really incredibly meaningful for us is we have a decade-long partnership with Landry's Restaurant Group. So if you're in the US, you would recognize their brands as Morton's and Mastro's and Del Frisco's, Chart House, etc. They have about 600 restaurant concepts, hotels, casinos, etc. So we've been doing a number of things, working with them through doing actually consumer wine festivals that they help promote through their network of guests and consumers. We've been doing on-premise promotions. We're doing restaurant concept takeovers with sort of different wineries at every restaurant location in the US. That's something we have planned for the spring. And then through that relationship, they kind of walked us across the street, so to speak, to the Rockets basketball team, which their owner owns Landry's as well as the Rockets. And that's been really fun because we've been able to leverage the Landry's sort of food and wine expertise, especially in the Texas market, and then do some really creative pop-up winemaker dinners before basketball games, sip and stroll wine tastings, places where people are coming for an entertainment experience, and we're adding on sort of a food and wine experience in front of that to create sort of this additional value add for the fan, a value add for the team, and certainly a value add for our winemakers and wineries that are there. And we look for partners that are willing to literally buy the wine from our winery partners to bring it in to these conversations. So I think our winery partners get asked all the time to donate wine. It's marketing expense. So really, when we can find partners that are willing to help sort of invest in the partnership with us, it's really meaningful. And so, I mean, I think on a local level, we were having this conversation with a number of wineries a few weeks ago. I mean, I think it's so important to think about how you can scale that even within your own region. So find one or two local restaurants and go to them and say, how do we do more added value dinners, experiences, something special, a special pour that can be offered, or hotel experiences. So I think, you can take what we're able to do on a more national level in the US with kind of a global partner and think about how do you scale that in your own region if you're a small brand or small winery.
To piggyback on what Karissa said, what we're seeing now in our research at Wine Market Council is the consumer is not going to the wine regions as much as they used to visit wineries. So wine tourism numbers are down in many places. And what we see this working is the wineries going out to the consumer now. So one way is through partnerships, as Karissa mentioned. Another way is just going into more, we call it mobile wine tourism or wine tourism on the road, or going to doing pop-up tastings in like urban settings in cities. For example, here in Petaluma, every Friday night, they have a wonderful place where local bands come and local food trucks, taco trucks and everything. And now small wineries are starting to show up there. And they're really connecting now with younger consumers in those kind of venues. So going to where the consumer is, which we used to do that 20 years ago in the wine industry, and we sort of stopped it. We sort of said, okay, they're coming to us. But that's changed again. The way the world works ever since COVID, that has changed. So that's one opportunity that we see. I know a winery in Long Island who actually has they call it their farm market. They literally travel down the coast, the East Coast, and go to different festivals and concerts and set up. So going to where the consumer is, that's one of the important things to do now. Another thing we're discovering in our latest research with looking specifically at young and multicultural consumers is they're saying when they go to a casual restaurant, because let's face it, they're not necessarily going to Michelin star restaurants, many of them at this point, they don't see wine. It's just, I don't know if you've been to a restaurant lately in the US, Sid, but wine has been pushed to the back of the menu. You go up, you get this colorful, usually a beverage menu, and it's filled with gorgeous cocktails and margaritas, and then the beer, it explains the bitterness level. And wine says Chardonnay. I mean, and that's about it. And there's not even a picture. There's just a list of brands. And it's just, it's dusty, it's tired, it's old. We need to change the way that wine is presented in on premise. So that's another, I think, great opportunity that we can, and there's many others, but those are just two to start with.
As a regional organization, we don't have, with our budget being what it is, we don't reach directly to the consumer very often. We really have to focus, as Wines of South Africa at least, in reaching through the trade. But we have had some of the similar partnerships, for example, with Urban Grape, which is a wonderful retail store based in Boston. They now have a location down in DC. For us, they're particularly interesting because part of our mandate is to promote brands owned or featuring or where people from previously disadvantaged groups, the Black and other groups that suffered under apartheid, play an ownership role or a management role at least. And that is part of Urban Grape's mandate. So that's been a wonderful partnership for us, for example. To Liz's point about wine tourism, for South Africa, people are coming, Americans in particular, since America is my responsibility as far as raising the awareness of South African wines. They are going to South African wineries. We've seen a huge boom in tourism post-COVID, largely thanks to United Airlines and Delta Airlines, both of which have started flying direct flights to Cape Town. Previously, to get to South Africa as American, you either needed to go via Europe, or at best, you could fly one of South African Airways flights via Johannesburg, which is quite convenient. It's already a long flight, and to have to go through Johannesburg, which for a lot of people isn't a real tourist destination the way Cape Town is. By some reports, Cape Town is the most visited city in the African continent, or the sub-Saharan African continent anyhow. So that's been really wonderful for us. Americans are now the number one visitor to the Western Cape, where the winelands are. And the wine industry is really well set up for tourism. You can bring families, you can bring, it's not just a tasting room experience. Wineries have restaurants on site, they have accommodation on site, they have hiking and biking trails on site, and all sorts of other experiences. So we've really been working carefully with the South African tourism promotion side to highlight wine as part of that experience. And we know, once a American gets down to South Africa, they come back as advocates for the category.
Yeah, I'm going to take a similar tack as Jim, and it's a little bit more perspective, not something we're currently doing. So we run a wine export program, and we've been very successful in Europe. And the markets that we're focused in Western Europe are very similar to where our state's marketing board, I Love New York, is trying to attract visitors to come into New York. And New York City is the largest inbound market for international tourists. We see over 60 million people a year come through New York City. They're not necessarily just staying in New York and New York State. They're then moving on to other destinations, but we are a focal point. And so we're working to align where our export markets are with the international tourism markets, so we can capture that market share of international tourists coming into the U.S., because many of them have indicated an interest in agritourism. They stay for 2 weeks at a time in the U.S., so they're interested in unique experiences. Some of them, we also are fortunate in New York, we have the Niagara Falls, so folks will take a bus from New York City all the way up to the Canadian border, and they need a place to stop in between for lunch or for a pleasant experience. And there's a lot of beautiful locations in New York State where they can stop, and many of them are wineries. So I attended a conference earlier this year in Los Angeles called IPW, which is an international tourism trade show. And it doesn't matter, I think, doesn't matter what region it is in the US. Seattle and LA, I think, are the next two largest inbound markets for international tourists. There's an opportunity to tell a better story to those folks. The California regions were generally pretty well represented at this conference, but I think what's really important about international tourists is they can fill that space during the bumper months of January to March, January to April, when visitation goes down for our wine regions, and they can come in. They have a lot of funds that they're willing to spend. So I think that's an opportunity, and hopefully when we talk again in the future, I can report back on the success of increasing our visitation from international tourists.
Yeah, congratulations to Sam. I was just in the Finger Lakes, and I found that the region outstanding and very beautiful. The reality in Chile is different. You have to consider in that context that we receive in total 5 million tourists a year to the whole country. So it's like what receive, Jackson Hole in Wyoming in one year. So that's the reality. So we have a huge opportunity because Chile is really easy to get there. You have an overnight flight, have a counter seasonal condition, and then you have the same time zone than the East. So people can, go in July, take a flight, and be skiing the same day. That's amazing. And so we're piggybanking, as Karissa was saying as well, and Jim, to the tourism side of things. The wine is the second aspect that tourists visit when they go to Chile. So it's really, tying in with tourism. In fact, this week I'm in a roadshow with the tourism board in New York, promoting wine as part of the tourism offer in Chile. So it's a good pairing. But we're also trying our best to get to consumer out of the trade events, and we are doing festival. This is one We have, in fact, next Monday in New York City, we're so happy to have 500 consumers that bought a ticket to attend this, immersive experience. And so we have not only wine, we have pisco, we have music from Chile, food, caviar, salmon, things that you don't imagine will come from that provenance. But we have to push the awareness of Chile as a country, because in comparison to my colleagues here in the call, we of course are less known than Sonoma, New York, South Africa. But it's I think it's a different stage. So we are doing as we can, targeting consumers as was explained. But our predominantly focus is trade so far.
Fantastic. I want to talk more on, talking to the customer as well, right? There are some touch points, let's say shelf talker on retail, case cards at retail, your Instagram feed, your LinkedIn post, your website blogs, has anyone got any answers to some great examples of those communications, or how can we create that relevance? What is working these days? When people are at the last point of sale, what do we communicate back, and that returns into that customer engagement?
Well, I could talk about Tablas Creek. You're probably familiar with what they did. They're down in the Paso Robles, Santa Rita area of California, and they came out with a box wine for like $98 a box, which is a lot. And wow. So what they did is they reached directly out to their wine club and mailing list members on the blog, explaining why buying this box wine for this price was a good deal, how it helped the environment. And with this, in a couple of weeks, they completely sold out. So wow. you can communicate with your customers. I think it's really important, though, to have that mailing list, to have those loyal wine club members, and then have your winemaker and executive team really reaching out to people to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have seen some great point of sale communications that is working?
I think that personal touch is something we're definitely seeing with South Africans. It's always been a challenge. It is still quite a long flight from South Africa, but just like more Americans are going over there, I'm seeing more and more South African producers come over here, either working with us or more likely working with their importer to have that presence in the market and make that personal connection, and not just fish in the most saturated markets. We have some brands that you would think of as quite boutique and maybe hipsterish, and they are not, let's say, wasting time in the New York market. They are spending time in Missouri and Kansas, in places where there's more opportunities and less saturation of the wine presence to build their brands. And then that kind of, I think the industry as a whole tends to concentrate on large urban centers that then hopefully influence further out. But I think a lot of individual brands can reach out directly in that regard. And that's not something I can afford to do as Wines of South Africa, but I definitely encourage our producers to explore that if it seems right for their brand.
Well, we'll move to another slide. I've just picked up some of the things that I see really getting some engagement. And, like these are some examples, very casual way of communication, very direct way to speak, very honest way to connect with, especially the younger consumer, pairing pizzas with wine and those kind of things. I understand that there is a challenge between premiumization and putting a pizza next to a $40 Sonoma, let's say. Karissa, I would love to know your view on, or Liz, do you think this is like it's just perception, or it's okay? Like, even the rich guys can have pizza and wine, or what's your take there?
Sid, I'll jump in. I mean, I think absolutely it's important to make sure that wine is fun. I think there's this idea and notion that wine has to be serious, and it doesn't, at least from my perspective, it doesn't. It can be a serious beverage that people pour a lot of love, heart, soul into crafting. But at the end of the day, if a consumer's having an enjoyable moment and a glass of wine in their hand, I think we fully support that. We've had a lot of fun, specifically our partnership with the San Francisco Giants. We work a lot with Master Sommelier Evan Goldstein, and we've been having an absolute blast pairing great wine with ballpark food. So what goes with a hot dog at Oracle, arena or stadium, what goes with nachos and popcorn, and because in that environment is incredibly appropriate to be pairing, wines with those foods where they're going to have that experience, or an elevated crab sandwich because you're in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. So I think you can still be serious, create a serious product that's really fun to experience. And I think that is really important. So I love those examples.
I think, Liz, I've just picked this slide from your presentation. I think this will be a great way that the motivations to drink wine, right, which you've put out there. So if we were able to communicate back with these motives in our feeds, I think that would really create that engagement of that consumer. And I'll just read out a couple of things here. Like, it makes me feel more relaxed, laid back. Wine is more moderate drink. Wine tastes better than other. So we can play around with this. And, I'm more than happy to email if anyone's interested in getting Liz's presentation. We can email that separate study to you guys as well. But the point here is, find out these motives, and then you can use that back in your communication, right? Let's move to the other question, which is the culture. And I think, again, Karissa, you've touched base on sports. Is one of the great examples to touch, because that's culture, right? Like, anyone else has some great example of like movies or concerts or any other cultural places which you are doing partnerships, and some examples of some brand plays that you've seen really knocking the culture?
Yeah, I think not precisely from wines of Chile, but we have a brand from Chile that it's sponsoring the national soccer team of Mexico, tackling to the Latino populations in the US that are, evolving and growing very fast, by the way. So I think it's a good example of a cross-cultural push that is working these days. Yeah.
Let me actually ask, where do you think we are in the culture for the wine? What does that mean to you? What is that wine culture look like right now?
Well, I think it's changing vastly. I don't know if you read a recent article in the New York Times about the wine bars in New York City that are, populated with, folks between 22 and 30 years old. And they're all natural wine bars. And some people even go there just to have the fun of that community, not even, not necessarily to taste wine. So they're imbued in this new culture of wine, which is I found fascinating. And there are in fact examples of brands that are doing very well in that space. Yeah, wine is culture for sure, and I think to the topic that we're discussing about Latino, it's also evolving because Latinos, we did a research on that aspect, and they're normally not inclined to prefer wine over other categories, but now this is changing with also very diverse and rich origin in those Latinos that are coming from families from Mexico or not, or Central and South America. So you will have two types of profiles when it's about Latinos' conception of wine. So that's also, I think, a good channel for us in the future.
I think some of you also have a very like New York. I mean, Sam, you can literally play with New York, right? It's a very strong brand name. And let's say South Africa has its own definition. Sonoma is like outdoor, So are you playing with that in your communications?
We were doing that prior to COVID, really identifying New York and the attitude of New York and the urbanism of New York when we were in international trade shows. And to Julio's point, that there is interest from Latinos, so we're starting to invest in marketing into the Caribbean and Central American countries. I wanted to add to your cultural renaissance list here too. Vietnam is a very young population, and they are also getting very serious about wines, and there's a growing sommelier community there as well. So, I think just to go back to New York, often when we're in international shows, people are like, "Oh, you grow grapes in Central Park," because it's hard to conceive of anything beyond New York City. But I think what we really try to play on is the fact that most of our wineries are still family owned and operated. So there is this, local sentiment we can play on, and that it's, unique to these specific locations in New York.
I mean, do you use your card when you knock doors to the New York restaurants? Like, is there a program that, hey, support us, or, you got to have a New York section, or, what kind of things do you do there?
Yeah, we had a promotional program called New York Drinks New York, which was a grand tasting that we would do, or a big portfolio tasting. And then throughout the year, we would invite trade and media to our various wine regions so they could experience them firsthand, meet the winery owners. We even had them participate in harvest as well. So that was a good way of, building some long-term allegiance with, the key staff at the key restaurants in New York City and the retailers.
Okay. Maybe Liz, I would love to ask you, let's say when it comes to me, when I think of culture, it's like where the attention is and how we are consuming today, So I would do a lot of influencer collabs on Instagram because that's where people hang out. I would do TikTok. I would do entertaining content. That's what the state of the consumption is today, even for older generation. So, have you seen in your studies anything like that as far as, where and how people are just consuming things?
Yeah, I guess one of the big surprises for us in our latest study of the U.S. wine consumer was that 40% of them are on TikTok. We didn't know that it was that extreme and spread out. So now that TikTok is legal in the United States to advertise wine on, I definitely think there's more opportunity there. And I have talked to some young influencers who are on TikTok for wine, and they grow their audience so fast because people are interested in it. And it's not just all young people who are on TikTok. So I definitely think that's an opportunity. I also see, your wine in the media you have here as your third bullet point. Another brand, just as an example of a brand that's doing very well in the US is Josh, Josh. Yeah, it's selling well. It tastes good. It's not that expensive. And for example, the other night I was watching Saturday Night Live, and there was Josh. They were talking about Josh on Saturday Night Live, and it was part of the skit. So I definitely think there's more opportunity for wine to move into modern culture, not just in the US, but all over the world. I like what we heard about Vietnam. Nigeria is another place that's growing. The whole Latino population is. We on our research on Latino, yes, they're drinking wine, but they're not accepting wine as much as we find with the Black and the Asian community in the U.S. And when we talk about what goes with Latino food, still people are gravitating more towards beer or margaritas or something like that. So we have opportunity. I think that the wine industry, we're making some progress, but we still have a ways to go to embed ourselves and move forward to get into the modern day culture of media.
I think for those of you who don't know what Josh is up to, just Google Josh meme. It's a crazy play that they've done. I think 20 million views collectively, easy. So just Google Josh meme, and you can literally try to do something like that as well. So here's an example of the slide of the Josh I have here. But let's go on wine and trade. So that's where I personally believe that US is still, retailers create brands in US. Still, I believe that the floor displays, the Walmarts and the Total Wines and the Bevmos, the fine wine merchants, the sommeliers. It's a push category. Like you give them a deal, and then that category is born. So how can associations, or what kind of examples you see, and how do we use if you had to tell a winery that, hey, do this with the retailer, and that's what is working. So give me some trade examples of how can we grow wine and some good partnerships, please.
I'll jump in here, Sid. I think one thing that's interesting, since you have so many associations on this call, I think we sit in a really unique place where we can go to trade partners representing the region and bring multiple winery partners with us to do that. So I think often brands don't have, at least in Sonoma County, 70% of our wineries are incredibly small. And so they don't necessarily have the resources or the relationship building capability to go out into the marketplace, maybe the way the association does here. And so to really leverage, be able to come in and uniquely offer, a portfolio that's not a distributor. So you're coming in from a view where you're really doing storytelling, not sales. You can really look to those sort of relationships uniquely. So we're finding that. And then also looking at how you, I want to say, intersect your partnerships. Again, the Rockets and Landry's is a really interesting version of that. We were on a call this morning where we had the entire wine team from Landry's with the concession from the Toyota Center with the Rockets partnership team, all talking about how we make wine more relevant to a basketball fan. And so I think those types of where you bring your partners to the table, and in this case, they work together already in a really unique way, but thinking creatively about, matching partnerships so everyone gets a win out of it, especially the wineries back in the region.
Just on that, like I had a panel at my previous show where restaurant chain buyers were there, and one of the Victorian Wine Association from Australia asked the question to Rachel Lowe, which is the buyer of Lowe's, the stadiums, and all that stuff. So he said that how can I influence you? I'm ready to support and do billboards and whatnot, and get the Victorian wines moved. But obviously because of the laws and the 3-tier system and whatnot, she said no ways, we don't do any of that. So how did you crack laundries, or is it even like, has anyone else been successful? Do you think that the associations can knock doors of chains and big influencer buyers? And are there kind of different partnerships that can be done?
We really look to bring, which is easier because we're based in the US and our growers and our winery partners are here in California, but really bringing people to be there. So it's not, we love our distributors and our partners that help us get wine to market, but to literally have the farmer there pouring wine, talking about the vineyard and how they practice their stewardship and sustainability and how they treat their employees and what those relationships look like are incredibly important. So in a way, we really try to bring the owners, the farmers, the wineries to the relationships and to the partnerships. And again, in this morning's call, talking about, a small pop-up tasting right before a basketball game with 6 winemakers there, paired food from the ballpark there. So I think in that way, that helps add value across, again, a multitude of brands, and then also picking partners that complement each other. So we're having, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Cabernet and Sauv Blanc and a Riesling and a Rosé, all kind of represented a region wide, so you can really tell a really complete, diverse story about wine.
Maybe I'll still ask a question too, and I would love to know a practical answer as well. So Julio, you said to me, introduced to Larissa, right? She did some Wines of Chile program in her airport lounges, for example. So was that like she just picked herself and then you just wanted to thank her, or was there a partnership play there?
Yeah, I was listening to Karissa. I think it is really amazing what she's doing in that partnership. That I think the most important adjective there is like, you have to build on time. It's not 1 year in and out thing. We have done many of those with very big regional, national retailers and chains like restaurants. But if you don't create a culture that is attached to the brand and love.
That's exactly where I was going. So you just go as a country, and whoever's in the shelf will get the benefit, right, at that time. It's not like if 20 brands of Sonoma are there, and then obviously they are going to be getting the sales benefit. But how can other brands get benefit when you're pushing in Total Wine, the Sonoma tastings, pop-ups, for example?
We've created a real culture amongst our winemakers and our growers here in Sonoma County, where to some extent, everyone really believes in the value of promoting brand Sonoma County. So I think, at any one experience, whether it's at a Total Wine, it's a Landry's, it's a local restaurant, I think introducing someone and having them fall in love with our region, want to come visit us in our region, and then saying, wow, I really liked this Cabernet from Rodney Strong, it's Sonoma County. I bet I might also like the Jordan Cabernet Sauvignon from Sonoma County, because the brand Sonoma County starts to mean something. So I think that's a lot of, I want to say, a bit of accountability or maybe responsibility of the associations is to create an affinity with the region and a view or perspective on the region. Like, I think you mentioned it in maybe being cheeky at the beginning, like Sonoma County is about outdoors, and absolutely, you come here, you hike, you wine taste, it's beautiful sunshine, you got the coast and the ocean. So absolutely. So you're creating that experience wherever you are, trying to create that emotional connection to the region that you hope translates into whatever bottle of wine, whatever varietal of wine, whatever brand of wine is on the label.
Okay, let's have Sam and Jim talk about importers and distributors. What can we do with them? Have you done things with them and some examples of how do we influence or get them on board?
Well, I mean, it's obviously they're very important partners. I work with them. I don't want to say I'm not leading the way, but we try to find events that will intersect with the interests of a bunch of different importers, especially, for example, when they have producers in town. It's an older model we used to use was one of okay, we're going to do a road tour and we're going to do this event sort of thing. Who's available? And then it would end up being kind of a bit of a mishmash. Whereas now I can say, okay, tell me when your producers are going to be around. What can we do? And when I get agreement between 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 importers, and we say, okay, this is an intersection where we can all work together. And I think we've gotten much better about getting that feedback and working together in that regard.
Sam, anything with distributors, like other state distributors?
I don't have anything on distributors. I think my direct experience with the LCBO in Ontario, Canada, have worked over the past 6 years to build New York as a category with them, because previously they maybe only carried 1 or 2 wines, and leveraging funding from the USDA, we've been able to better promote New York wines with the LCBO, and they're a great partner. We benefit from the fact that they have hundreds of stores, but they're committed to educating their staff. They're committed to educating their consumers. So we've now created a partnership with them. They're carrying 20 New York State wines. They do a cool thing. They have this destinations collection. So there's a store in Toronto that's got a whole dedicated section to the wines of the US, and they have a call out section for New York wines in California, Washington, and Oregon. And so they do programming there around the wines. We have our producers come in who are distributed with the LCBO, do wine tastings with the consumers, do wine tastings with their staff. So that's been a very successful partnership. But I want to echo, I know we're trying to keep it positive, but what Julio said is I am impressed with the partnerships that Sonoma County has developed, because we've been approached by similar groups, like the Jets wanted to do something with us. Our state has been very involved with some of the national golf tournaments, because a lot of them come through New York. Those are kind of exciting placements, and they benefit a very small sliver of wineries, because at least in New York, the majority of our wineries don't have good distribution. With the whole distribution tier here is very consolidated. So if you don't have a distributor or an effective distributor, you're not going to be able to take advantage of those partnerships. But there is pressure on us as an association when the market goes down, that they want to see us step up and doing these big swings to help them sell more wines. But these, the big swing things are excited and they generate press, but at the end of the day, it only benefits maybe 10 wineries or less. So I do think, I wrote down here as I was listening to Karissa, small and often, you gotta, all these things need to be part of a bigger strategy. So I mentioned earlier, we used to do this big portfolio tasting in New York City called New York Drinks New York. And it was exciting, and everyone was talking about New York wines in the month of February. But beyond us then bringing the trade and media up to the wine regions a couple other times throughout the year, there wasn't a sustained campaign within New York City to keep that interest going. It's also very difficult to do that just because New York City is such a competitive market. But you need to have a comprehensive strategy that includes these big swings, but also has these small and often little things that are building the identity and building the brand. So yeah, I mean, it's challenging with a limited budget to decide what's really the best strategy that's going to have a short and long-term effect.
I just shared one slide from Nielsen as well that I got. Some of the different channels, especially in the US, convenience store, liquor store, grocery stores. One good fact is convenience store wine sales are on the rise. So please look at that data. Try to, even if it's, you like it or not like it, but 7-Elevens are growing, and that's where the wine sales are growing. So if you are in the $7 to $15 range, that's a sweet spot, and that category is growing. Happy to send you this, but these are some things that buyers, when they walk into this outlets, they are looking at that. So I'm just showing you this slide because if you match this with the retail behavior and present your decks, I think, if you offer, for example, convenience in your merchandising, you will be seeing a positive meeting when you're meeting a convenience store, for example. Transparency and sustainability, and we have some great people here, who can talk about, especially Sonoma. So I think, why don't we touch base on, my main question here was, is actually consumer willing to pay a price for this organic wine or sustainable? Is the retailer really ready to support? Have you seen it, or it's just a talk? What can you share us some examples of your experiences with actually the trade is supporting this?
Well, in our research, it shows that consumers are willing to pay $2 to $3 more per bottle for a wine that's sustainably or organically certified. Consumers do understand organic better, though, than they do sustainable. But then that price, you hit a point where if the wine is too expensive, then that sort of tails off. But in that sort of sweet spot, the $11 to $20 range, they're willing to spend more. And so that's pretty positive.
And retailers are convinced with this. Like if you go and talk to a wine buyer in Total Wine, and you can justify that, hey, it's $1 more for your cost, and they're okay with it?
Well, they're stocking the wine, so I guess
okay.
so.
Okay, good.
We've had
Karissa. Sorry, Jim.
So South Africa has had a sustainability program since 1998, and we've 96% of the industry right now is certified. We weren't seeing much interest, but it's now become, we kind of thought we had done the education, then we've had to re-educate people about it because suddenly sustainability is something that people are looking for. And I think it's a combination of social change. I think for South Africa in particular, South Africa is associated with its wildlife, even though you're not going to find lions and wildebeest in the winelands area. They're actually mostly up north these days. But there is the fynbos and natural environment that makes the Western Cape so beautiful. We also find that sustainability doesn't just mean environmental sustainability anymore. And we have a lot more questions about our social sustainability programs, like the Wine Industry Ethical Trade Initiative, which is modeled kind of a social version of the environmental sustainability program, or fair trade. Three quarters of the world's fair trade wines are South African. And I find more importers, more retailers looking at that when they decide what brands to work with in stock.
Maybe Karissa, you can answer this. What kind of 3 or 4 main certifications you recommend wineries to do? If they're selling to like big chains like Total Wine, Targets, or big restaurant groups, let's say, what really is the common practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least in California, we're really fortunate that we have several great sustainability programs that are very aligned in terms of sort of total practices and looking economically, environmentally, and also at social equity. It's probably the most used, I would say, adopted is the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance, their certified sustainable program. We work also with Lodi Rules, Fish Family Farming.
But that's for just Californian wines, right?
So these are for California. Yeah. So I think for me, what I think is important is we recommend for wineries and growers holistically to look at an overall sustainability certification, because it is so holistic in terms of your total business environmental footprint, as well as, employees, community engagement. And then underneath that, depending on where they're farming or where they're located, or frankly, sometimes what they can afford, to consider thinking organic or biodynamic under that. So kind of sustainability is the overarching umbrella, the very holistic approach. And then you narrow down into specific practices or other sort of certifications underneath that umbrella, if it's relevant kind of for your business and where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Can you throw us like 3 or 4 retailers or restaurant names that are really pro this, that people can really approach and they are supporting this?
I mean, I feel like, and I might be talking a term, but I feel like everyone's really focused on it right now from a retail and partnership perspective. In fact, I think even in some of our partnerships, we talk a lot about value alignment as a region, value alignment as a brand. And I think it's not just an on or off premise. It can be any of those partnerships that we're talking about as having those aligned values. So, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a Walmart that is, what you would say, a very accessible sort of marketplace that cares about it, to a Specs or Total Wine, to a Kroger's, to, our local wine shop in Sonoma County, Bottle Barn, that supports our wine industry so well. So I think all of those organizations are looking to be able to at least understand that you have a sustainability commitment and some sort of certification. And ideally, there's some sort of seal. I know we have a certified sustainable grape seal that our wine brands can use on the label. That's a quick takeaway. That's kind of like a seal of approval, if you will. I think we need to do more and more to have consumers get the quick takeaway, because sustainability holistically is incredibly complicated and very place driven and includes so many best practices that it's hard to create the elevator speech for consumers to get that quick takeaway that knows, that you're doing the right thing and you're doing well.
Great. I love this value alignment. I think that's a great way to sort of find who aligns with you and then sort of present them that. Anyone else has anything to add in sustainability?
I'll just add that we're finding now that some of the younger consumers are cynical about it and they want more details. Like when you say you're sustainable, what does that mean? What percentage of water have you saved? How are you treating your employees? What percentage of where is your main source of energy? So they're actually wanting just some little short data bites with numbers attached to them, which is interesting. We do find that younger, millennials and Gen Z especially are really interested in sustainability and organic, but wanting a little more information. And boomers are not as interested. I mean, they're happy it's there, but it's not necessarily a top thing that they're seeking out. So I think it's important. I like this example you have here, Sid, of dry farm wines. Where you're literally saying the wine is sugar free, it is lower alcohol. You're talking about the actual attributes, and that's what people are wanting more of. And like Karissa said, Sonoma County is 99% sustainably certified grapes. And so that label can go on the bottle, but then it's nice to be able to have a QR code or some other way that people who really want to say, okay, what does that mean? That they can get some more information about it.
Yep, Sam?
Yeah, I'll build off of what Liz kind of hit on, which is trying to avoid this perception of greenwashing and how do you have integrity in your program. So, we recently launched our own sustainability certification just about 4 years ago, which is built on a vineyard management guide that was developed by Cornell University over 20 years ago. And our goal in launching the program was to take advantage of the fact that there was this consumer interest, but to help our growers, the grape growers, be recognized for the practices that they're doing in their vineyards that are already sustainable or are already helping them responsibly manage their impact on the environment. My goal for our program is not so much that the wineries are selling more, but the growers are getting the increased values for their grapes for committing to a higher standard of vineyard management, because they're from an economic perspective, they should be the ones benefiting from the improvements in their practices, not necessarily the winery capturing that $2 to $3 more per bottle. That should be flowing back down to the vineyard and the people that work on that vineyard.
Last bit is the wine and health. I mean, we're seeing a lot of obviously the health consciousness is coming. Low and no category is sort of one of the biggest challenges we have, and then the whole neo-prohibition movement and whatnot, that wine is not healthy anymore and so on, right? So last topic is that a little bad news, but I think just putting it out there for the conversation out there. So IWSR recent research showed that wine is going to decline for next 5 years, for example. I mean, that's as far their research goes, right? And no and low is for sure continuing to show the growth. And the second part we can see is follow the money, the old saying goes, where the big brands like the big wine houses are also launching RTDs and spirits and whatnot, right? So something is going on. Some data is with someone where obviously the big money is now going out of wine. As an advisors, as our cheerleaders, what's your advice on how do winery play the next 3 to 4 years game? How do they change? How do they do they go back on the profits and not worry about top line? What would be your advice here?
I found the Wine Market Council's research report on wine consumers that they released, I don't know, was it a month or 2 months ago, Liz? And full disclosure, I serve on the board, but I do think the kind of the research that they showed about multicultural consumers, that's a group that the wine industry really hasn't communicated well with for a long time. And there's probably a lot of opportunity there, not to say that the health and wellness concerns are not legitimate, but there's been a little too much pretension in the wine industry for a long time, and that needs to be kicked down and we need to open up the doors and we need to speak to people. And I like what Liz said earlier about we have to go to where the consumers are. Sounds like Karissa and Sonoma have been very successful at doing that as well. It's you got to be innovative and got to be willing to meet the consumer where they are and get them excited about wine. I mean, we'll probably still see a decline, but there is a group of consumers that we need to be talking to and talking to them and how they want to be approached.
Loving it. Yeah, agree. Yes, Liz.
Oh, I just said, well said, Sam. Sam said everything. But yeah, I think there is. The other thing too is we need to list, the consumers are sort of telling us, what they're interested in right now. And, wine can be trendy. It can be like fashion. In fact, there's a few wine brands like Silver Oak. I'm getting ready to talk to them, but just partner with a fashion designer. So, they're that whole partnership thing too. But right now, what's up in wine, non-alcoholic wine, growth of 30%. Of course, it's from a small base. A low alcoholic wine up. Wine cocktails and cordials up 20%, and white wine sales. So consumers are telling us what they want. We just need to.
So do you think people should make those SKUs, like even if it's private label, just keep it in your portfolios?
I don't think everybody should. I don't think everybody should because it doesn't fit everybody's brand. But I do think there's an opportunity for everybody to at least have one low alcohol wine. And by that I'm making like right around 10%, or maybe a little bit less, because those are not that difficult.
But what if Liz, this is a permanent change? What if we just don't come out of an RTD or a wine in can or a wine in or a low and no? And what if this is just a permanent shift?
Oh, if it is a permanent shift? Well, it could be a permanent shift. I mean, what's a little concerning is that the baby boomers, who've been our main core consumers, are actually drinking a lot less alcohol because their doctors are telling them to, and they're doing it faster than we thought they were going to. Fortunately, the millennials, who are now in their 30s for the most part, are stepping in, and you often do see people adopting wine more in their 30s and 40s. So that's a positive. But yeah, if this is a permanent shift, that's even more of a reason. I don't know why I think everybody could make at least one low alcohol wine. Now, non-alcoholic wine is not for every brand, but I think there are some brands that could benefit from that. And to tell you the truth, people who are doing it are selling those wines for the same price or even $1 more a bottle, because you're making them the same way, and you're just taking the alcohol out after you make the wine in the same way. Pick the grapes, ferment the wine, take out the alcohol. That's an extra step. And people aren't willing to pay more for that. And again, it could be a trend. Maybe it's not, maybe it is, but we always need to listen to the consumer.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm just adding one point here, Karissa. I know you want to speak, but let's say it's all about the shelf, right? You lose a spot and you're gone. So my worry is, we should not lose the menu placement, the shelf spots, the wine. If there are 1,800 SKUs in a wine store, we should not be 1,700 next month. Over to you.
I mean, I think, Sid, just to build on that point, and I was just going to acknowledge what Sam said about sort of that word innovative and innovation. And I think we've been a category that has enjoyed growth for decades without a huge focus on innovation and trying to capture different places in the store and different places on the menu. And I think it's really on us now to not lose those spots, but potentially grow them by offering a more diverse portfolio. I mean, I think at least for me, so if it's a party of one in my own home, there's always going to be a place for a beautiful, higher premium bottle of wine with a nice dinner. That doesn't mean I might still not enjoy a wine in a can ready to drink when I'm headed out to Lake Sonoma, on a boat. So I think we really are, to Liz's point, we got to meet the consumer where they're at, listen to them, and provide sort of a more portfolio of options for them to embrace. And I think it's really on us to be more innovative, more creative, more partnership driven than we ever have been as a category.
So I'll take the questions that we have already received from the attendees. So these questions are open to everyone, so whoever wants to jump in. I'll try to merge these questions because they were kind of repetitive. So what, according to you, what the panel suggests of how to change the perception of fine wine to Gen Z consumers? And I think this was a question which recently also was asked in the chat group. So anyone who would like to just quickly give any bullet points, or what are the changes that you can do to make sure that Gen Zs feel attracted towards the fine wine? Anyone?
Well, I think we've actually sort of answered that question to some extent. But it's again listening to what they're looking for and going to where they are. And what we're hearing from them is they're not really seeing wine in their world. Keep in mind they're mainly online a lot of the time, and they're busy. But the ones who are drinking wine, they're actually saying some of the things we've said. They drink it at the end of the day to relax. They drink it to have a social connection with their friends. It's not something they drink when they go to a rager or a party or something like that. They don't see wine, and I don't actually think that's a bad thing. Wine doesn't need to be at rager kegger parties. Some people do drink prosecco there, and wine, prosecco is wine, beautiful wine. So, but again, just going to where they are, listening to what they have to say and what they want and what's important to them. Another thing that keeps coming out is wine with my food. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to show on social media and TikTok wine, as Karissa mentioned, wine with hot dogs, wine with potato chips, wine with tacos. People are not seeing that. Wine with my food, with my cuisine. They're just seeing it with, European cuisine. So there's lots of opportunities with Gen Z. And the other great thing about them is they're a pretty positive group of people. And they're just like, tell us about wine. We actually haven't heard much from the wine industry. Like Karissa said, for 20 years, we've been doing fine. And then all of a sudden, we realize we really need to start communicating better and innovating.
I wanted to add what makes wine unique compared to other adult beverages is that it does convey a sense of place. Why do we have 4 different wine regions on this caller? We could have a lot more. Is that the grapes, while you can have a Chardonnay from New York, California, Chile, South Africa, they're all going to taste slightly different because they come from different terroirs, which, maybe that's blasé now to talk about terroir, but I think that's what makes wine unique from, I'd say, spirits, because, how different is a vodka from one place or another? It's basically still just a distilled spirit. I mean, there could be slight differences based on what you made that vodka out of, but I think wine uniquely kind of conveys the place that it comes from. Even within the Finger Lakes, the winemakers there have really tried to position Riesling as their signature grape. But even within the Finger Lakes, you can be on the same lake and the Riesling is going to taste different from one location to the other. And that's because of the variation in the soil and how the winemaker treats it. And I've been thinking about this a lot. I feel like wine is almost like baking bread. Like, we love baguettes from our local baker, but we also like to go to Paris and have a nice baguette. Or, why are there so many mystery novels out there? It's because every author has a different take. So I think that's, each wine has its own signature that's unique and different. And that's what makes it, I think, special and approachable and creates culture.
Sam, I was going to add, I love that so much and that you brought that up, because I think in addition to that, or building on that, is that you can literally learn everything you want about that product, because you can know exactly the vineyard it came from, who the farmer was, who the winemaker was, when the grapes were picked, at what level. I mean, there's so much. You might know that there's a vineyard dog, but not a cat. I mean, who knows? Like, there's so much storytelling, so much robust storytelling that you don't get in other packaged goods per se, if you treat this as sort of a category of packaged goods, that I think is really meaningful, especially to a younger consumer. So I think, again, it goes back to, and there's a question about media spend. It's about us being really creative and our wine brands being creative about sharing that information, whether it's data-driven, liaison sustainability information, water savings, or it's just an invitation into the family and the home in the vineyard to have that experience. I think that's incredibly important and relevant. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Sam.
Thank you, Karissa. I'll just take that media spend that you said, because that's one of the questions that has been asked. So to change the game, we all know that there has to be increase in media budgets for wineries, be it small or medium. So the question is, how can we make that as a common business practice? So what we are listening to is that the spend on the media budgets is not being something which is being done by the wineries. So the question here is that how can we make it more streamline for be it a small winery or be it a medium-sized wine?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've, even as an association, we still love our print media partners, a Spectator, Food and Wine, et cetera, but it is expensive to do print media. There's no doubt, let alone thinking about heading to TV broadcast. But I do think the opportunity on social media, which is inexpensive and completely accessible, has really created an amazing opportunity for wineries to not have to have a big media budget. I think for me, the important piece is, and we struggle with it even as an association, is consistent content. That you can't just dive in once a month or once every 6 months and be like, I'm here, pay attention. It's how are you curating the story year round and consistently, and decide what that time is. Is it once a week? Is it twice a week? Is it, how are you differentiating? And I think it's hard because you need someone really focused on creating that content and making it interesting. But I think if you can have consistent content, you don't need the money for media. You can actually deliver it through your social channels and leverage your partners and others to do the same, and your consumers and customers to share their stories.
Maybe Liz, this is an idea for you. Like if there is you are associations of association, right? So if you can sort of start a pool and a media kitty, and then you can sponsor the elections, and then that's it.
Great idea, Sid.
I think there's one more. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Liz.
I was going to say, technically, if you look at, best practices in marketing and business, 20% of your budget should be spent on marketing and, media and influencers and so forth. But we don't often see that case because we're dealing with small family wineries all over the world. Maybe there's like only 3 people in the company, 3 people. And so it's challenging. And so that's where trade associations like all the, the ones we have on this call, New York, Sonoma, Chile, and South Africa can help, bring those small budgets together to then promote the region. And I think everybody's doing a great job. Yes, there's more we can do, but all 4 of the regions on the call, I think people definitely know about, them. And it's just more of an issue with budget and spend and so that we can get to where we are. But there are lots of great efforts that are happening.
But the question is how to counter false or misleading claims of wine being unhealthful.
I actually haven't really dove into this in the U.S. context because it's such a legal minefield to start making health claims. And I mean, as Wines of South Africa, we do not have the the bandwidth to cope with that if something were to go awry. I think we're happy we're doing an event in New York City at the end of the month as part of the Come Over October, which I think doesn't address the health issues head on, but rather underlines the long-term social and cultural value of wine and the idea of sharing a glass of wine or a bottle of wine with people and things like that. So I think that's a good kind of tangential approach that we're happy to take part in. I do certainly keep a close eye on some of the reports. Harvard recently had a very good report about moderate consumption, and there are certain journalists, Felicity Carter, who I think have done a wonderful job calling out the politics and misleading aspects of what's going on with the neo-prohibitionist movement, especially in the government capacities with the WHO and the US and Canadian health suggestions and things that are being bandied about.
Yeah, I think pushing more into the responsible drinking message is important. So as an association, we help underwrite the cost of tips training for tasting room staff. So, I mean, I think it is a legal obligation that they're trained to do, identify excessive drinking in the tasting room, but, making it easier for our wineries to have their staff trained is an important way that we can encourage responsible drinking, because I think part of it is excessive drinking is what just gives alcohol in general a kind of a bad perception.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just adding one point there, I think that we're just using that as an excuse, to be honest. Tequila and mezcal are the fastest growing, and that's way more unhealthy than wine. So I don't think people really are listening. It's just just advocacy here and there. I don't think that's really affecting.
It's a challenging situation because, as you know, in the U.S. it's not legal. for us if you're making or selling alcohol to talk about health benefits. So hands are sort of tied when it comes to that. But in terms of just what can be done, journalists like Jim mentioned, Felicity Carter, we need more journalists like her out actually sharing the truth, because unfortunately we are not legally allowed to do that. But I think if more people could step forward, universities can actually, step forward and talk about the actual research and that we can't, then that would also be helpful. We need more journalists.
I also see, and going down to a question, I think was another, maybe it was not here, it was on another slide about cannabis. And I think cannabis has not been studied properly in terms of health effects because has been an illegal substance for so long and still is at the federal level. Now that it's being legalized, people are actually able to do the research, and we're starting to see some things pushing back on cannabis. And I don't necessarily think it needs to be a us or them sort of situation, but I think then kind of this idea that cannabis is healthy, that needs to be looked at much more carefully, and that might make people at least be a little bit more circumspect in their decisions if they are literally deciding between one or the other in some context, which I'm not entirely sure it is an either or, but if they are, that's, I think, an important part of the process in having all the information for both sides.
Just one question, Angita, I loved here, which I personally would love to know, because I think people, want to get young consumers early as their first drink. Like, this is a good question. What factors motivated them to start drinking wine? You guys remember, when you had your first drink, or what influenced you for your first wine?
I can share the research results on that.
Yep.
We find that there are 5 main reasons that people get into wine. 1, they're introduced by friends. 2, they're introduced by family. 3, they're introduced by a trip abroad, usually to a wine drinking country. 4, they get in through cooking or food. If they're in that, if they love to cook, or if they're chef, whatever, they start to get into wine. And then 5 is just sort of, some people magically get bit by the wine bug, and there's not any clear reason what causes that interest. It's like people have an interest in, collecting stamps or watching birds, or all of a sudden somebody has an interest in wine. That's sort of what the research says. Those are the 5 ways people get started. So that's why it's good. One of the things that we see Napa Valley and Sonoma wineries doing is encouraging their older wine club members, who are baby boomers, to bring their 21-year-old children and their friends to a wine tasting. And then oftentimes
that's a great thing.
Yeah, that gets them in. Yeah.
Any closing remarks? Over to you, all of you, please.
Yeah, I would like to say that we have something in common as a new world, even though we don't use that term anymore, at least in some of the spaces out there.
Oh yeah, I did not notice that.
Yeah, some, sums or a group of sums are not using that, referring to old or new world anymore. But yeah, we are less regulated maybe, and that's also to the point of Karissa and Sam. We rely on a great storytelling, and I think we have it, and that's also in normal case more compelling to younger people, younger audience. So I think we have that discovery and tame side of things that can be more attractive to younger consumers, and it's great. So we have an advantage and an opportunity there.
I think we started the conversation, you asked maybe a little bit about hope or optimism for the wine industry. And I actually have a lot of optimism right now, because I'm seeing something, and I'm sure others feel it. I feel like it's the first time this conversation is a great point of it, is that we're actually, as a category, as an industry, this is the most I've seen us all work together to make wine more accessible and really build the category. And then not from a region perspective and not from a brand perspective, but really working together, the Come Over October campaign, others, to really invite and motivate people to enjoy wine, invite wine into their, conversations, their shared experience, and then figure out what you like and figure out where you like it from, but most importantly, working together. So I see that as incredibly important. And I don't know any other category that's coming together the way we are, or any other community coming together as the wine community is around the world. So I think there's so much optimism in that.
So I think one of the things I think we have to realize, even if we do seize back some part of the the alcohol drinking that's happening, it is going to be a consumer who doesn't just decide that they drink, I'll pick on someone who's not here, they drink New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc and that's it. The new consumer is someone who wants to experience different things all the time. So we're all going to be working with the same people who are, depending on the occasion, may want a New York Riesling, or may want a Sonoma Pinot Noir, or a Chilean Sauvignon Blanc, or a South African Chenin, or whatever it might be. They're going to be moving, we're going to all be interacting with the same group of people. It's not that we can put the corner or market on any particular group of wine consumers going forward.